Cliff Kupchan is a swimmer, but he's not just the guy who gets in a few laps at the local pool. For example, have you ever been swimming in the North Sea or the Baltic Sea or numerous lakes in Russia? I sure haven't, but Cliff has. And to keep this swimming analogy going, he thinks our world is drowning because of a lack of leadership. Hi, I'm Dave Price, and this is the American Farmland Owner Podcast. Cliff Kupchan has worked for the U.S. State Department during the Clinton administration, the House International Relations Committee of the U.S. Congress, where he served as a top foreign policy advisor on Russia and North Africa. He also ran a large foundation in Russia. He has decades of traveling all across the globe. He's also talked face-to-face with Vladimir Putin in Russia. It's a heck of a story that he will share with us in a bit. Well, all of this experience has him concerned right now that there is not enough international leadership, and that is hurting agriculture and so much more.
Do you believe, as a way to start this, we're a couple months out of a presidential election where we heard numerous times the world is on fire. Is the world on fire, and what does that mean?
I think the world is on a sort of Kindle fire.
Okay.
It's an initial fire, and it can get a lot worse, or it can get better. I do like the concept of geopolitical recession. The key cause of lack of international leadership, the key cause of that is lack of institutions. We need institutions that countries around the world feel are legitimate. Until we get to that point, we'll get more wars like Russia-Ukraine, we'll get more skirmishes in China, we'll get more stuff going on in the Middle East. States and people are not satisfied with the level of international governance today.
So if there's this lack of international leadership, then does Donald Trump have that potential to be kind of a superpower uber leader in this absence, to fill the absence?
I don't think so. I see him as a more unilateralist, which he certainly is. He doesn't like alliances. Retrenchment-oriented, not isolationist. That's way too strong. But look, the American people do not support a highly robust role in the world for the United States. And given the inwardly looking sort of anti-free trade sentiment in this country, I think it's going to be very hard for us to lead until we get back to our values of 10 or 15 years ago. Unless we get back to them, and that's just not likely.
So when you hear America first, what does that signal to you?
To me, America first signals America's interests come first, and that not that the IMF or the World Bank or the UN come even close to first. That America's interests, it's like having a first choice and the next highest one is a 10th choice. And to me, that's how Trump thinks about the world. And within that, tariffs are the favorite tool of choice. And whenever you use a tariff, you create an unhappy other nation.
So agricultural producers, energy producers, the American consumers, there are a lot of questions about tariffs, how they would work, what the impact would be. Is it possible that Trump is onto something that most economists don't see, that somehow tariffs will benefit us and will accomplish his ultimate goal?
Tariffs will protect industries. It will, to some extent, didn't work much in the first term, create American jobs. I don't think there are, but this, I think the punishment, the downside, is worse than the upside, in my view. And I think that's consensus in the sort of policy community. But he could, you never know until you know.
So would the true value of these tariffs be more the threat? And so if he comes out, let's say in the first 100 days and wallops China, let's just focus on China, really wallops China, could the potential positive be that it changes behavior and then those tariffs back down? Is that an optimistic view of it?
Well, that's the theory of the case that Trump operates on, that every tariff threat is potentially something that could be negotiated. And he's trying to induce behaviors not just from China, but from Canada, Mexico, Taiwan, and most of the European Union have either a bilateral goods surplus or don't spend enough money on defense, in his view. Whether that target is 2%, 3%, or 5%, I've heard him say almost everything so far. But my sense is, and again, I know people that were in the Trump campaign, now they're going in the administration. The message from them was, unlike tariffs on France, tariffs on China are mostly not for leverage. They're mostly to stop China from what President Trump thinks the Chinese are ripping us off. He's out to stop that. So I think the tariffs in China are not like the others, and there's more likely to be a significant increase in the top rate and in the average applied tariff by the end of this year.
But in China, they can make a lot of stuff far more cheaply than we can.
Right.
So how does this work? So the goal would be, we're gonna instead make this stuff?
That's just Trump's goal. But the news came out today that China has a $1 trillion trade surplus, much bigger than it's ever had. And what they're doing, domestic demand is low in China. They're having real troubles with investor sentiment.
They don't have babies there.
They don't have babies, but Chinese put all their money in real estate. Then the real estate market collapsed. Everybody lost a lot of money. It's a very risk-averse population right now. You keep money in your house and a savings account, but you don't do anything risky with it. And that severely dampens demand. So they have a very serious problem.
Is the U.S.-China relationship, is that the international relationship we should be watching closely? Is it the most important one?
They're the two superpowers, two greatest of great powers. It is the single relationship by far that matters the most in geopolitics. But, just to continue a thought here, I think Trump wants tariffs to lead to negotiations with the exception of China. And that's a very important part, I think, of his core thinking. I mean, ultimately, he would like a deal. Both sides would like a deal. Trump's got a domestic agenda he wants to press through. Immigration and tariffs are right at the top of it. Immigration and tax reform are right at the top of it. So I think that's how he looks at things.
So if maybe the deal is not sort of top of mind, top goal, does he want that international conflict? Does he want good guy, bad guy?
Well, I think Trump genuinely doesn't think the U.S. should be fighting wars. Generally, wars are a waste of money that aren't often in the U.S. people's interest. So he's not looking for a war. He's going to be surrounded, though, by real hawks, uber hawks. Hawks that I think are very talented, but they're very right-wing. Rubio, Secretary of State, Secretary Rubio, Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, and Pete Hegseth looks like he'll be confirmed now. They're all kind of very far right and very anti-China. And Albridge Colby, very serious senior guy at DOD, same thing. So I think we'll end up flirting with fire. High tariff rates, a crackdown on chips going to China, restrictions on Chinese Communist Party members coming to the United States. We're not necessarily at all. I think war is unlikely. War is unlikely until Taiwan becomes the issue, which I think it will. We're heading towards a much more strained relationship, though, and one where I think China will, as tariffs go up, and the working groups that Biden established, mill to mill, econ working group, AI working group, I think those are going to be put on ice by the Chinese.
Excuse me. What do you see about the future U.S. relationship with Mexico?
It's going to be a real tough relationship, much tougher than I think Claudia Sheinbaum, the president, and Mexicans, society and markets think. The U.S. is going to want to deport, I think, between 1 million people this year and perhaps 3.5 million over the next 3 years. It won't be the 10 and 12 million that Trump was going on about during the campaign. I don't think we've got logistics. I think just too expensive, too hard to do. But there's still a lot of people going to Mexico. And Trump's position is that Sheinbaum should accept lots and lots of people from other countries. And she's going back and forth on whether that'll happen. It's a very tense relationship. Also on fentanyl, they've got to stop, and on the cartels. I think if this doesn't stop, my sense is he will use the National Guard and at least buttress the border, maybe going to Mexico.
As you know, the agricultural community in particular is very concerned about this. If you believe these numbers, that potentially up to 40% of the farm workers could be undocumented.
Oh, the USDA number is 35 to 40,
So that would be a substantial, dramatic, whatever the right word is, impact.
You would have a labor shock in this state, and the price of labor would go up. It'd be hard to find help. You have to pay them a ton. I think this state, if he goes after H-2A visas, farm worker visas, and if he deports lots of people from rural states, there will be a labor shock on Iowan farms.
Do you see that it is the first effort to push out folks who are here undocumented, don't have legal status, however they got to that point, is that, but it also sounds like there could be, as you, I think, just pointed out, the decline in legal temporary status as well. We just don't have the bodies for any of this. So does that, what does that mean for our economy?
It means much more expensive labor in Iowa. It means unhappy farmers. It means there's going to be pressure on the Republican public elected officials in this state.
And many states.
But, okay, sure.
Yeah.
In many states, many farm states, to get Trump to stop it and make a deal with China, or provide fulsome support for farmers, like he did previously. But there's going to be unhappy people.
When you talk about Russia, you've actually met Putin several times.
A lot of times.
What is that like this?
Once, twice, yeah.
Is that right? What's that conversation like? I mean, that is a multifaceted guy, right?
Yeah, very much so. Again, he's a tragic figure because he started the war in Ukraine. He's a very skilled man. He has tremendous command of information. He likes to be challenged. He likes to receive heat and return heat. He can be funny. He can get very angry. I've been the butt of that. It was absolutely no fun. It was rather terrifying. He's a inward focused. His personality is what you would think a spy would be like. And indeed, he was a spy for most of his life.
How do you compare Trump and Putin?
Putin is one of the leaders most like Trump. He is a populist in many ways. He appeals to blue-collar Russians. He's much more popular out of the cities than in the cities. agrarian sport, if you will. And they both like to, how to put it, they both like the spotlight. That's how I'd put it. Just two big personalities. Now, big personalities usually clash. They obviously don't. They get along. So I think that's how I see it playing out.
And do you get a sense of why?
No, it's been a mystery. You know, first time he got elected, I thought Putin had something on him. Mm-hmm. Money, women, something. But the people I know who are close to Trump and worked for him tell me that's just not true. So, just not true. I think they genuinely like each other. I think they're both, you know, there's an element of tough guy to both of them. Big element of tough guy. They're both tough guys, right? They both run with an authoritarian image, and both quite effectively, frankly. The ceasefire in Gaza may be because of Trump this week, you know. So nobody likes to stand up to either one of them.
But the tough guy side, on the Putin side, you're talking about a guy who's been accused numerous times of having people killed.
He's killed his enemies over the years, right? It's
I mean, that's kind of taken, that's no Clint Eastwood tough guy, that's like...
No, and it's not Donald Trump.
Yes.
Right?
So how critical is that then for us going forward, that relationship between the two?
It's really important.
I mean, does Trump settle down the assault on Ukraine?
I think that Trump and his Ukraine advisor, Mr. Kellogg, you know, I think Trump is a very shrewd guy, very smart guy, and he wants a deal. If Putin, as I think, will resist at first, Putin will want long-term, massive disarmament restrictions on Ukraine. He will want Ukraine to be vulnerable to a Russian invasion for the next 300 years. That's unacceptable to Ukraine, unacceptable to the Russians, to the Americans. So he'll try for that. I think he might actually, end up arming the Ukrainians more for a while. He'll do whatever he needs to do to get leverage on both sides and get them to a table.
And Putin will he want more land?
Yes, he wants.
Is it about more than that or not?
He wants to get rid of the Zelensky government. Mm-hmm. If he can't do that, he wants as much of Ukraine as he can get. He always wants more land. Yeah.
You are also, how many times have you been to Iran? Can you even count?
In Russia, I've probably been to 50 or 60 times.
Okay.
Iran, I lived there for 2 years. Iran, 5 or 6.
What kind of threat are they to us?
Via their nuclear program, they're a big threat. It is very much a rogue regime, a revisionist regime, that, and given the loss of its forward deterrent, Hezbollah, Hamas, and Syria, they need another form of deterrence. It is not in the national interest that they get our national interest. They're allowed to get a nuclear weapon that works, even a dirty bomb that works. They're less of a threat in the region because they're so much weaker now than they were before Israel went after them. But they're a threat militarily, and they're also a threat in the sense that they're a significant oil producer. Mm-hmm. Saudi and Emirati fields are within short missile range of Iran. So that if there were to be a war, and I think there will be, and that's quite concerning, Iran could block the strait, shut down Saudi, and oil would be over 100 again. So Iran poses both a military threat and a threat, to farm inputs, to gasoline, to fertilizer, to a lot of agrarian products. It's a big deal.
In light of that, does it seem like the best policy then for drill, baby, drill, expand renewables as much as you can so that we are less dependent? I mean, we're already a net exporter, I believe, still.
Yeah. I think energy independence relative is a good thing. We are at, 13.9 million barrels a day right now. I mean, my understanding is it's going to be hard to get a lot higher very quickly. But oil could be very expensive. Could be very expensive this year. The more we make, the better off we'll be.
I've heard you speak, and you said, "Hey, I'm not an expert in agriculture," but all of the things you're talking about will impact agriculture in one way or another, right?
Yeah.
So, as people listen to your, if warnings is the right word, should they be pessimistic? I mean, some of these things are scary, right? All these international wars, conflicts, disruptions. How should that not freak us out?
No, but look, I mean, we'll get a ceasefire in Gaza, we'll get a ceasefire in Ukraine. I think a lot of what Trump's going to do, he'll succeed in, reduce bilateral goods deficits. It'd be good for American manufacturers, the ag sector. So I think there's a lot of good. I mean, I talked about Saudi Arabia, India, both winners. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of opportunity now. The risks, though, are real. I used the example of the 1930s, because I think it is the period that most resembles no international leadership, a vacuum. And a vacuum leaves much more room for conflict. This is a dangerous stage in history. And I think we will get structurally more wars than we have in the past. So yeah, I mean, it's worrisome, but it's better to, face reality in the face and then try to base policy on that than it is put your head in the sand.
Let's wrap up with this, because you've used the theme of leadership frequently. You have, because of your extensive international travels and your experience with sitting down with some of these leaders like this face to face, what makes an effective international leader, to give us something sort of optimistic here? You talk about the vacuum, this absence of it that we have right now, but what makes that kind of successful, vibrant, visionary type international leader?
It is a mixture of personality and legitimacy. If you can't get people to like you, if you can't get their attention when you speak, if you can't make them feel they understand and care about your problems, you're a bad leader and a weak leader. So first, it's the ability over television to come across in a friendly, empathic, genuine way. And, I could cite, I think Bush 41 was an example. I think Barack Obama was an example. And I think you got to be that way to get into the game.
Now, you worked for Bill Clinton. Did he have that?
He had that too, big time. I should have mentioned that. Just an incredible ability to speak warmly, just right off the cuff. So that's, I think, the most important trait. But then you got to be smart, and you actually got to deliver stuff to people, and so that they can answer the question: am I better off today than I was yesterday? In the affirmative, and that's where the rubber hits the road. Is not whether inflation's coming down, but the prices of milk still going up. Really? Mm-hmm. To understand people's lives. A problem with the Biden administration was that they paid for it big time, trying to trade on inflation coming down. They did a great job on inflation. But as long as people are still paying more for groceries, they're going to lose elections. Uh-huh. And they did, right? So I guess that's how I would describe a great leader. A personality that makes people think he cares about you, and an ability to, most importantly, deliver what you promised on the economy.
Thank you. Appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Cliff Kupchan also helped to author the Eurasia Group's 2025 Top Risks Report. It lays out what is working and what is not across our world and what that means here in the United States. You can find that in our profile piece about Cliff in the American Farmland Owner Weekly newsletter. Check it out at AmericanFarmlandOwner.com. And you can actually get in there, put your email address in there, and get it sent to you every week when the newsletter comes out. It's the latest perspectives on what is happening. It's the place where landowners get their news. AmericanFarmlandOwner.com. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for caring about the future